All right, so thank you again for joining us for the first update for student loans as we return to repayment. This is a webinar series between Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, IDFBR, and University of Illinois System. It's a sub-webinar series of the Get Savvy, Grow Your Green Stuff webinar series that we do annually, but we needed to focus a little bit more on student loans this year as repayment is expected to begin in October. So that is what we're going to focus on. My name is Andrew Pellegrini, and I run the Student Money Management Center for the entire University of Illinois system. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Nikki. Nikki, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Nikki Giancoula-Shanks, and I am the policy director over at the Division of Banking at the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. A lot of people don't know or are not aware that our division actually regulates the student loan servicers within Illinois.
Thank you so much for joining us, Nikki. And we're also going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself in a poll. So I'm going to launch this poll, and this helps us better identify who's attending, what kinds of questions are needed to be addressed. It also helps us better cater some of the discussion to where you are. So if you can just answer the demographic poll that we put up, that will be really helpful. It helps us better identify what your needs are and better speak to those needs in real time. So I'll leave that up for probably a minute. So thank you for filling that out. So we want to know kind of your age range, where you are in kind of your employment or academic journey. Are you a student? Are you a full-time employee, etc.? Knowing your gender helps us to better identify some of the unique needs around that. Race and ethnicity also helps some of our colleagues who have government funding maintain funding by letting us know, or letting their funders know who is participating in programs. So any responses are appreciated. It looks like about 88% of you have participated so far. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. So thank you very much. It looks like we have a wide range of people here, anyone between 18 and 54. There's a pretty good distribution. There are a lot of students, but a lot more full-time employees, which makes sense because repayment is going to happen most for full-time employees. We have more males and females today, and we have both Black or African American, white, and prefer not to respond. So thank you again for joining us, and I will stop sharing that and we'll move on with some of our objectives today. So we want to make sure by the end of this webinar that you know when federal student loan repayment starts, understand the Supreme Court ruling on student loan debt relief that happened earlier this month, and how to update information in your FSA account. So just a disclaimer, any information about federal student loans is rapidly changing. I said before I started the recording that there were some updates this morning. So what is discussed in this webinar is current as of July 14th, 2023 at 12 p.m. noon. We're going to share some general information, but we can't provide financial advice on specific information. And please be careful about what you share in the chat. So just wanted to keep that disclaimer up front today. I'm going to hand it over to Nikki to talk about some recent changes in student loans, and we're going to do a quiz to kind of expedite that.
Thanks, Andrea. So our first question that I have for you is, when will interest start accruing again on federal student loans? So Andrew just launched the poll there. So you go ahead. All right, so This gets a little confusing, as does everything with student loans. Interest accrual does start September 1st of 2023. So your interest, the 0% interest, will go away. All right. Next. All right. So when will you need to start making payments on your federal student loans? I believe Andrea is going to launch a poll.
I already did.
Did you?
Yeah, so return to repayment poll, there are answers coming in for September, October, November. We asked you, when do you think repayment will start?
Andrea, for some reason, I don't have it. So maybe you can, oh, there it goes. It's there. I don't know what happened. All right. So again, so this is about 50-50. Your first payment is going to be due in October. So interest starts September 1st. Sometime in October is when your payments will restart. We don't know an exact date. It's from October 1st on. That is where you really need to pay attention to any sort of communication from your loan servicer, because it may be the same day as you used to pay your loan payment on. It may be a random day in October that then you could log on and change to better fit when. But basically, interest accrual September 1st, and your first payment will be in October.
It may be good to specify, since we have a lot of students on, if you are in-school deferment and have subsidized loans, the subsidized loans will not accrue interest while you're in school, at least part-time. For University of Illinois students, that's 6 credit hours, but if you are below part-time, you will start accruing interest even on subsidized student loans, and unsubsidized student loans will start accruing interest regardless of whether you're in deferment or not. So that is kind of a unique thing to pay attention to if you are a student, full-time or part-time, is that interest will differ depending on the type of loans that you have. For everybody else that isn't in school, that isn't in some type of deferment, doesn't have subsidized loans, your interest is going to start accruing September 1st. I just wanted to make sure that we were very clear on that.
Thank you, Andrea. So again, just to reiterate, we do not know a specific date in October for when your payment will be due. That is something that you will have to log into FSA and talk to your servicer, which we will talk about in both this webinar and our future webinar series. All right, so now let's get into this student debt relief and the Supreme Court ruling. Was it last week? 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago now. The Supreme Court issued a decision that blocked the Department of Education's proposal that was the one-time forgiveness. That was the student debt relief plan. That is not to be confused if any of you guys were part of or are currently part of or want to be part of the public service loan forgiveness program. This ruling does not affect anything with that. This ruling is strictly on the one-time student debt relief. That was where it was, you went on, you filled out a quick survey on the website, and you could be eligible for up to $20,000 just cancellation on your loan. So that is what the Supreme Court blocked. So if you did go online and you had filled out that debt relief form, which was almost 8 months ago now, 9 months ago, you're not going to receive that debt relief. So There is a one-time federal student loan debt relief page that we will put in that we already put in the chat for more information, but we just really wanted to make sure people understood that there will be no, that was 10K, you were eligible for 10K or 20K wiped off your loan balance. That is no longer happening. So once the Supreme Court announced this, there was a few responses from the Biden administration, including today. So let me go through a few of these. So right after the ruling, President Biden did announce that there's going to be an alternative plan for some type of loan debt relief, forgiveness, cancellation. However, this involves something called the rulemaking process. And in federal and state, any type of rulemaking process in government takes months. It could take years. So anything that they come up with for that will not happen before repayment starts. So your balance is likely your balance. Nothing's going away from that. Now, this morning, the Department of Education announced that they are doing, if you are on an income-driven repayment plan, you have been paying, they're doing what they've called, besides during the COVID pause, just in past years or whatever, they are doing what they are calling a one-time adjustment. And you don't have to do anything. The Department of Education and the loan servicers are automatically going to fix payment counts. So what that means is you may, if you're on an income-driven repayment plan, you may see, instead of saying you made 10 payments, maybe now all of a sudden you have 15 payments towards your 120. Again, this is not anything you guys have to worry about in terms of logging on, doing anything. It's from the Department of Education. It's supposed to all be automatic. That being said, we also are not 100% sure when that is going to take place. It sounds like, from announcements that I've been reading this morning and different contacts at FSA, that what they're going to do is kind of triage borrowers. So borrowers who are close to finishing off their income-driven repayment plan, that adjustment will happen first for them, as opposed to somebody who may have just graduated college and just started their payments and they still have a lot to make. They will be last to get that payment adjustment. That is all the information we have regarding that right now. This is why Andrea and I are doing these webinars monthly, and we're focusing on something different every month to get people ready and ask questions about return to repayment, because as Andrea said, things are moving quickly and changing. But the key takeaway that we want people to know and understand is that due to the Supreme Court ruling, there's not going to be an instant 10K or 20K cancellation on your loan. And any other fix like that is going to take a very long time for them to be able to implement. So return to repayment is going to start with your current loan balance.
Thank you, Nikki. So in the interest of time, let's talk about where to go before repayment starts. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you are logging into your federal student aid account or FSA account. You can go to studentaid.gov. You can click login or create an account. This does require a multi-factor authentication or 2FA, two-factor authentication. You'll want to agree to the terms if you've never had an FSA account before, and you'll want to update your information in the FSA Dashboard. The FSA Dashboard is broken down into different components right now, but again, they're updating the websites a lot. The other day I was looking for some information in the morning, it wasn't there. In the afternoon, it was there. So this could all change, but in general, you're going to have your My Aid section that has loans, which include the principal and interest that you owe, as well as your grants that you've received while you were in school. This could include Pell Grants, for instance. It will also include a section on upcoming payments, which will include your servicer or servicers. If you've gone to different schools or have had loans taken out at different times, you might have different loan servicers. It will also have a due date and a total due. That could differ depending on if you make payments before the due date goes into effect, depending on your servicer. There's a lot of other factors that might be changing what information is there, so you might want to monitor it. Your loan servicer information is also there, so you can look at your servicer details, you can look at their website, their email, their phone number, their address, so you know who you've been assigned to for servicing loans from the Department of Education. So loan servicers have changed a lot in the last 3 years. Currently, these are the loan servicers: Advantage, Default Resolution Group, ECSI, Great Lakes Educational Loan Servicers, Ed Financial, Mohila, Nelnet, and Oslo Servicing. So you could have started out with someone else and now you have a different loan servicer. It's important to go to the FSA account and log into your dashboard to see who your servicer is now, especially if you are expecting communications from them in the coming months. It's also important to know your rights because there's so many rapid changes with return to repayment. It means there's a very big opportunity for issues to happen with your servicers, with scams. We're very concerned about scams happening. So it's important to remember that you do not have to pay for help on any student loan issues. If you are having an issue with your student loan servicer, you can report them to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and you can also report student loan debt relief scams to the Federal Trade Commission. So we put some information in the chat for you to look at there. So before repayment begins in October, if you have never made a payment before, there is a web page on studentaid.gov specifically for you in making your first payment, regardless of when you have graduated. If you will be restarting payments, you made payments prior to the payment pause and you're going to restart payments, there's a separate page for you to go to, which we will also put in the chat. So, and I will also send a follow-up email next week with all of the links that Suhas has been sharing in the chat for us. So, again, we wanted to make this very brief so that it is less overwhelming for all the borrowers re-entering repayment. We want to encourage you to stay in contact with us. We will be doing more webinars, obviously, and we're also going to stay on and answer questions that you might have. But if you need to go somewhere, if you are already overwhelmed, you're like, I'll deal with this more information later, that's fine as well. We're recording this, we'll make it available later, and I'll send it to everyone that's registered. If you did not register, please make sure to register so that I have your contact information and can send that recording and the links that we've been sharing in the chat to your email address. So again, thank you. And I'm seeing some information in the chat, so we will start answering some questions.
So the first question that I saw come through was through the Q&A. So I'm just going to answer this live in case anybody else has questions similar. As a graduate student taking out federal unsubsidized loans, can I exit in-school deferment and enter the SAVE repayment program if I'm currently not working and do not have much in assets? Does the time in repayment while I am in school count towards PSLF? So we currently don't have a ton of information on the SAVE repayment program. I was on a call with federal student aid yesterday. They are hopeful that this will be able to be launched by the time return to repayment starts. However, it wasn't like a guarantee just because there's a lot going on. Also, that being said, there's currently no calculator or anything on the website. There's just some general guidance for people that's how the SAVE plan should work. So there's still a lot of questions regarding SAVE. It is supposed to help the majority of borrowers. That being said, your time in school does not count towards PSLF unless you are working full-time as well. For the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, you have to be working full-time. So that means
I was just going to say for qualifying employers. So there's a lot of layers.
Yes, sorry. And a qualifying employer is somebody, it has to be for a public service. So you're working for university, a nonprofit, a state government, whatever, but public service. So if you are in school full-time and making payments, that will not count towards PSLF. And then in as far as the first part of your question regarding not paying, like starting payment on while you're in school, Andrea, do you want to maybe address that one a little bit more, because you deal with that more than I do?
Yeah. So currently, even before the payment pause happened, most of the time, if someone wanted to make payments while they were enrolled in school, at least part-time, because the servicers automatically enroll you into in-school deferment, you have to manually go in and make payments. So enrolling in a specific payment plan doesn't work because you're in deferment. If you wanted to make payments on your principal balance, you could, but again, those payments have to be done manually. So they could change that because there's a lot changing right now. Different servicers could have different policies or processes, but a lot of that is also up in the air. But historically, you have not been able to enroll in a payment plan and skip in-school deferment if you're actually in school, because they verify that with your school. So hopefully that answers the many layers of questions that were in that initial question. If you do have clarifying questions, please either put them in the Q&A or put them in the chat. That would be really helpful. It looks like there is another question in the chat. It's your first time, so you're not familiar with the process. Is the interest rate fixed for all students? If so, what's the rate? Do you want me to address it, or do you want to address it, Nikki?
Go ahead, Andrea. I'm actually also going to put in, I was just on the FSA website, I'm going to put in the chat the link to interest rates as you explain.
All right, thank you. So in general, there's once you have loans, they've been dispersed to you, you're in school, you get to graduation or you drop below that part-time status, you have a grace period, which is addressed in the first payment page that the studentaid.gov website has. But just to give you a verbal kind of idea of how that works is you have usually about 6 months after you have either left school because of graduation or drop below part-time status before any payments are required. As far as the interest rate goes, the interest rate is typically associated with the 10-year treasury note. So it depends on when the loans were dispersed. That will determine your interest rate. Interest rates vary depending on when the loans were dispersed. So for instance, if you have loans that are dispersed at a 6% interest rate one year, and then you have loans that are dispersed at a 4% interest rate another year. If all those loans go to the same servicer, then you will have one interest rate that is a weighted calculation of your interest rates based on how much you owe of those loans that based on when they were dispersed. I know that is very complicated, but the simple answer to your question is the rate is fixed for the term of your loan, but it varies based on year that your student loan was dispersed. I hope that was minimizing the complication a little bit.
The chart on the link that I dropped, those are the rates as of now. Okay. For like this year, and it actually links to past as well. So if your disbursement, as Andrea was saying, was a different year, a different time, could link and you could look up and see. This should also though be included on in your loan servicer dashboard. When you log in, you should be able to see what your interest rate is.
All right, we're getting some more questions in the Q&A. Jumping off the first Q&A question, can I exit in-school deferment after talking to my loan servicer and having them switch and enter the SAVE IDR program while still in medical school, so that my monthly payment would most likely be $0 per month and effectively no interest would accrue on the loans? Again, your loans will accrue interest if they are unsubsidized. It doesn't matter if you're in school or not. As far as the SAVE plan, like Nikki said earlier, there is not enough information available for us to be able to answer this super effectively. And there's no calculators available. So it's something that we can't really answer. Again, if you're in deferment, every servicer is going to have different processes for that. But in general, you've not been able to exit in-school deferment to enter any IDR plan in the past. So it's unlikely to happen, but it could. There's been more surprises for this past year or 3 years for student loan repayment than I could have imagined, that's for sure. Do you have anything to add for that, Nikki?
Just so, Andrea, the SAVE IDR repayment plan, we're hoping that in our future webinars, as we get more information regarding it in general and when it will start and what that means and a calculator and all that stuff, we will cover. But currently it is saying that if you enroll in the SAVE program, you will not have interest. But again, we don't know when that starts, or as far as like exiting in-school deferment, we don't know if that's a possibility yet.
It would make sense with the introduction of the SAVE plan, but we can't definitively say, yes, that's going to happen, or no, that's not going to happen.
We never want to tell you guys anything that we can't 1,000% guarantee from FSA. We'll always try to be honest with that.
We always like to have our citations in order as well, so that we can show you where we found that information. So
any other questions?
I think the rest of our Q&A questions are just responses to our live responses. So I'm gonna mark those as answered live. Are there any more in the chat? If you think of any questions later as well, you can go ahead and email studentmoney@uillinois.edu, which is who sent you the login instructions today. Again, we are keeping an open mind with what we're discussing at each one of these monthly webinar updates, and we're recording them and making them available. The Illinois Student Assistance Commission also is doing webinars each month that go more in depth. They're doing longer webinars, so you might get a lot more information from those more in-depth webinars. We were trying to be strategic with chunking information, so it's not overwhelming for borrowers that are re-entering or entering for the first time repayment. So please let us know in the chat if you do have any questions. We'll stay on for a couple more minutes, but feel free to exit or think about this and then email studentmoney@uillinois.edu with questions you might have later, and we'll do our best to answer them. Illinois Student Assistance Commission is the entity that is doing other webinars on back to repayment, which I also at the bottom of the login instructions email that was sent today has a link to that page and how to log in if you want to scroll to the bottom of the login instructions email that was sent this morning. And we will also include it in the follow-up email that we send.
Yeah, we're kind of tag teaming with the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. So we're doing shorter chunks of different aspects of student loans. And then ISAC will be doing in-depth webinars. It's the same webinar, but they're going to offer it several times between now and repayment.
Mm-hmm. And we will also be doing a more in-depth webinar as part of our larger Get Savvy, Grow Your Green Stuff webinar series in April of 2024. So that's about the time that most students will be starting to graduate and get ready for loan repayment. So it'll be a little bit different. All right, so if there aren't any more questions, really appreciate you joining us today. Feel free to log off, get some lunch, distress maybe from thinking about student loan repayments, and we will follow up next week with the recording and all of the links that we shared in the chat. Thank you again for joining us.